Hello, welcome back to the Spider's Web, and we're continuing with Theyr. At least I think that's how it's pronounced. And the wash should be dry by now. We've left it long enough, and that's what we've got. Have you sussed out the basis for this character's colour scheme? I hope so. Anyway, let's get on with doing some what do we call it? Not dry brushing, highlighting. So we're going to start off or carry on with the flesh. Now the flesh we're going to do once again, highlighting all the raised areas with the Rakarth flesh. And we're going to do this quite gently. Everywhere that looks as though it's raised will get a coating of this, and then later on we'll go a little bit brighter. So I'm just touching onto the face, not going too far with that one because it doesn't look as though it's very highly detailed. And again, back into the paint and touching on all these raised areas. The idea being is we're showing the actual colour of the flesh, not the highlight colour or the shadow area. The shadow area is done by the wash that we put on. The highlights are still to come. So what we're trying to do is pick out the actual flesh colour, which will be the mid-tone of the mini, and we do that just by covering all the areas that are raised, leaving the shadowed area or the areas in recess uncovered. You know, part of painting is making minor adjustments. You don't make mistakes. You just make adjustments. They aren't corrections, they're adjustments. If you think of it that way, it won't put you off painting. So just be a little easier on yourself. This is supposed to be a hobby. It's supposed to be done for enjoyment, for relaxation. It's not supposed to be done to stress you out and get you thinking that you're inferior to other people because you can't do something the way they do. You know, I am by no means an expert at painting. These videos are done just for my own amusement, but hopefully they will inspire people to pick up a brush and give it a go. Just because, you know, I'm not trying to make it out to be something it isn't. You don't have to be perfect. You can make your little mistakes. You know, if you're doing this as a job and you're painting for people, then you don't have the luxury of making mistakes. But doing this as a hobby, you can do what you want. It doesn't make any difference at all. Right, so that's that bit. Let's go into the purple now and get the middle colour done on the purple areas. And again, we're just going on all the raised areas. And then I think really what I should have done is done these black and then highlighted them purple like I did with like I've done with other minis, but I decided to do this slightly different just for the sake of it, because I wanted a more cartoony look to this one. Because of the character I'm basing it on. And hopefully, as I say, you've picked up on who it is I'm talking about. You're not seeing much of a difference in this, unfortunately. I may have to just abandon the idea of this sort of like this step for the purple, because it doesn't look as though it's achieving anything. I can't see a difference between this and the colour that's already down, because I don't think the wash that I put on was dark enough. I think what I should have done was give it a black wash more than purple. But never mind, never mind. We'll keep going with it. We can always, as time goes on, we can always adjust things, as I said earlier. Next step, what I want to do for the skulls and the bones here is just using a little bit of the, what did I use for that? Pallid witch flesh, isn't it? I'm going to use some of this straight from the tub and dry brush it onto the skulls and on the bones. And just bring out some bright colours, like so. I'm not going overboard with it. And I'll also go down the staff with this as well. There we are, that will do. We're not going, as I say, overboard with that. Next, we're going to introduce wrong one. We're going to introduce the panelled witch flesh into the flesh colour, which is the Rack Earth flesh. And we're going to make this a much paler colour. And this is the bit out, this is the start of it, where we're painting the areas that are exposed to light. And you will see how different it is. If this is the first painting video you've seen of mine, you'll see how different it makes it when you actually when this colour goes on, because you're actually watching the top part of a lot of the raised areas come alive, shall we say. You'll see that you'll get a glint on the top of these areas. And as I said, we're just looking at the top areas of these parts. We are not looking at anywhere else. So anywhere that you think light will hit along the top, around the raised areas, that is where this colour goes. And also I'm going to do something a little more with this, because on the card for the character, his hand, he's looking at his hand and it's covered in blood, and we're going to do something like that at the end of this video for that. Well, not the end of this video, but I'm going to have to give it a covering of varnish before I do what I want to do, but it will be something that will make this stand out quite a bit. Some people may already have an idea of what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring in a bit more of the panelled witch flesh and make sure some more of this colour is mixed in, because I'm running a little with it. So we just need to touch up here and there on certain areas. Yeah. And that's how, there you go. We will be giving this a slight wash as well later on, because it doesn't look quite right at the moment, but you'll see why, hopefully. As time goes on, it just looks as though I'm just, you know, the difference between the what you may call it, the shadow area and the highlight area is a little too distinct at the moment, so we will be going over with a few, or with a bit of a wash, a very watered down, very weak wash, just so that these areas that I pick up on now actually achieve the result I want. There we go. Just going to rinse my brush off and make sure there's nothing stuck to my brush, because there was few moments ago, and we'll carry on and paint in areas that needs this highlight. And if you notice, I'm not actually covering every area. When I go over some of the earlier flesh tone that I've only just did beforehand, I'm not covering it all up, I'm only covering a small amount of it. And that's because you don't want it all being covered, because you're not going to see the difference in tones and difference in shade. You're not going to see the highlights, you're just going to see a separate colour. So you will see different shades of a colour in the raised areas. There we are. Next, we're going to add some of the pallid witch flesh to the purple and making that a little bit lighter. And with that, we're going to be covering up quite a bit of the raised areas, because if you remember so I'm going to add some more purple into there and some more pallid witch flesh into there, just to give me some paint to use, because it was a bit too dry what I've just been using. Yeah. So we'll just keep touching on certain areas. We're not, as I say, we're not going to be covering over every little part, just parts that are going to be hit by light. I have touched up a couple of places that aren't hit by light, which is personally down there. I'm just trying to pick out detail from those areas, because there's no detail actually to add. Oh, there's no detail picked out with the first colour, that's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to pick it out with this colour, and then hopefully it won't look as flat. There we go. And when painting lots of these little creases, quite a lot of the time it's a very good idea to use the side of the brush and go along the crease, rather than trying to pick out each individual one. Sometimes you might make a little bit of a mess like I just did then at this end, but again, doesn't matter. All you need to think about is trying to get the raised areas covered and trying to make it look 3D. It is 3D, but you can paint things which are 3D and make them look completely flat, and that's because you've not got any detail on them, no highlights or anything, and that's what actually kills your model. If you don't put highlights on, your model isn't finished, and you need to do a little bit more work just to bring out the details and make the raised areas pop. And that's the idea. And as you can see, I'm just using the side of the brush and just going over gently all the raised areas. I'm doing what kind of like a dry brush. It's not a dry brush, but it's very similar. I'm just using the edge of the brush. I've just got a bit too much paint on there. Alright, wipe some off. I'm just going on using the edge of the brush and just going over these areas. I'm picking out, as I said, any areas that's raised and facing upwards. In one of the earlier videos, I think it was the last one I did, I actually showed how I decide where the light's coming from, and that is by just looking straight down. If you look straight down, you'll see the light's coming from above. That's how I do it anyway, because when I see, as I think I explained it in the last time, I see it as if you do it all like that, so that the light is coming from above, whichever way your model's facing in game, the light will always be from the same way. Whereas if you try to be clever and do the what you call it, the zenithal, not zenithal highlighting, the other one, where change the direction of the light so that it's coming from the right hand side or the left hand side or whatever. If your model turns round, it doesn't look right with all the other models. If they're all facing one way and the light's coming from that way, and your model turns round, it looks as though it's got its own little spotlights outside of it, and therefore doesn't look right. That's how I look at it. I may be looking at things too pedantically, I don't know, but there we are. So what I'll do is just rinse the brush off so any moments, and go back into the pallid witch flesh and the grey that we used, the administratum grey. Okay. And that is going on teeth. There you are. Next, final look at this. Evil Sun Skeleton is next, and that will be going with a damp brush, and that will be going into the mouth, along the tongue, and on the tips of the teeth. And in fact, what I'm going to do is, at the moment, I'm just going to cover my hands with this for the time being. We're going to do something else with this after it's been varnished, but to give you an idea of how it's going to look towards the end, that's how it's going to, that's how it is. But as I say, it will look different to that. It's not going to look the same, but that's how I'm doing it. Right, next I'm going to have more of the pallid witch flesh going into. In fact, I'm going to get some more of that out of the palette, out of the tub, because there's not much left of that on the palette. I'm going to put a little bit out. So I'm going to add that into the flesh colour. Add a little bit more. There we are. And right on the very tops, some of the bigger raised areas, we'll just add a little spot or two of this colour. Just like so. And it makes it stand out even more. You can, if you want, almost go up to white with this, but I don't like that look. I prefer it looking like this, to be honest. and just a touch there, little bits on the forearm, on the muscle there, little bits here, and like so. And that, I think it's almost that. I really should have just put some of this pallid witch flesh onto the palette, but I didn't. So I'm going to put some more down here and make it just that touch lighter in the purple. And some of the very raised areas are going to get a coating of this. That will be on the top of the cowl, or whatever you want to call it. There we are. Just going to wet the brush a little bit because it doesn't seem to be moving terribly well off my brush. So I'll brush, twist it, and there we are. Again, just little areas, not everywhere. We don't want to completely destroy the highlights we've put on. And just a little bit down here. A little bit here. And just wherever you think some of this really bright light or bright highlight should go. I'm going to put some right down there and over that little area. There we go. That will do us for that. And now all I need to do is a very thin wash of the purple and the blue just to tie it all together. So I'm going to put some of this on the palette into the purple, obviously, a bit of water into it. It's incredibly thin wash. It's like a glaze than a wash, this part. It's just done to tie all the highlights and everything together. I don't often do this, but because I've done this in a certain way, it's not looking as I usually would do it. So that's why I'm doing a bit of a glaze over this now. Again, it's very thin wash. It's not there to go into the recesses, it's just literally there to tie all the colours and all the highlights, different shades together of the purple that I used. And it will do just that. Yeah. And it's a glaze, not a wash. So that's that done. And one more thing to do after I put the blue glaze on, because I forgot something which I don't usually do, but I planned on doing in this one. I have that. And scoop a bit more, because we'll do much more of this than we did of the purple. Bit of water into it as well. A bit more. And we're just going to go over all the skin tone. Even the red that I put on, we'll go over every little bit of skin tone. So that red is just there to give you at the moment an idea of where I'm going with things. But there is a technical paint by Games Workshop called Blood for the Blood God, and I intend to put some of that on his hand, but that can only go on after it gets the whole model gets varnished, because I'll be using a matte varnish, and that is a very glossy what's the word I'm looking for? It's a very glossy paint, and if I put it on now and then go over it with the varnish, it just looks as though I might as well have just painted it in red paint rather than use that, because it takes all the shine off it completely, which is not what I want. I want it quite shiny. But that's it. Painting this part. All I need to do now is just paint the what do we call it? I just need to paint the base black, which I'll do in a second, and make sure I've got everywhere else painted. There we are. So that's that done, and now it's just Abaddon Black, which is base paint, and we're doing it on the base. I'm not going to be going into putting it on the palette. I'm just going to pop it straight on the base, straight from the tub. It's a damp brush, and I can spread it about. I don't need to be too fussy about this stage. And the only thing I can really afford to be fussy about is the size of the brush that I use, because I possibly could have picked a bigger brush for this step, because it's a bigger base than the other ones I've used, but well, not to worry. I'm using this one, so deal with it. It doesn't have to be a wonderfully covered base. I can go over it again later on. I possibly will be doing with the basing textures or whatever I decide to use. I'm just making sure that the rim of the base, more than anything else, for some strange reason in this game, is covered properly. And I'm saying for some strange reason in this game because usually with these minis there's a little disc that you get with them for the hero characters, either red or blue, but with the vampires you don't get that, so that's why I'm making sure all the vampires the base is, or the edge of the base is shall we say, covered properly and uniform. Not like, I'm not bothered at the moment about the top of the base, but that's it. And I hope you've sussed out that I took my inspiration from Skeletor from He-Man. So all you have to do now is wait for the glaze to dry. Don't let it pool up too much. So if you see it pooling up, just stick your brush in and touch on where it's pooling, and you can then tease it out or absorb the the excess water. Yep, that's it for this chap. All it needs now is just one last look, and before that I will say, oh no, I did say there was one thing I wanted to do and I've forgotten. Yes, using the Evil Sun Scarlet, which I showed you earlier, which I used for his hand. I'm going to take a little bit of that on the brush and just a little spot on his eyes. Well, yeah, that's it. Right, so I've finished now. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Next one I do for Vampire Hunters is going to be the final one, and that's for the Vampire Lord Colfus. But for now, Theyr is finished. So that's it from us. So until next time, as always, take care, God bless, and bye for now.